Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tirabhanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Vijana Balavati Nivarari. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiramanacha. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Vijana Balavati Nivarari. Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tirabhanacha. Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tirabhanacha. Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tito Jayanudirayan Nasta Praishva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. This morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, the Rajasuya sacrifice. And this is on page 334. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata. So for those who may not be as familiar with Mahabharata, I want to take a moment and put this particular pastime in context. The king, great King Shantanu, had three sons really. Dhritarashtra, Vidura, and Pandu. So they were heirs to the kingdom. Dhritarashtra was the oldest, but he was blind. So as a result, he could not inherit the kingdom and went instead to the middle son, Pandu. So Pandu ruled very well, but he died early. He had 5 sons. Dhritarashtra had 100 sons. So when Pandu died, his sons were not quite of age to take the throne, and so Dhritarashtra became the caretaker for the kingdom. But the sons of Pandu were entitled to the throne. However, sons of Dhritarashtra were very envious of their cousins and wanted the throne for themselves. So the sons of Dhritarashtra, headed by Duryodhana, made plots to kill the Pandavas, the final one being constructing a house of very flammable materials and inviting the Pandavas to come and live there. This palace called the House of Black, and the walls were laced with turpentine and other very flammable substances. So the Pandavas were tipped off to the plot, and they snuck out, and the house burned to the ground, and everyone thought the Pandavas were dead. And Dhritarashtra had to feign tears. Oh, my poor cousins. Oh, my poor cousins. Anyway, I'll take care of the kingdom now. So the Pandavas, during this time, knowing they were in some mortal danger, stayed hidden, and no one knew where they were, or that they were even alive, except for a few like Krishna and Vidura. So at the right time, the Pandavas came out of hiding and made powerful alliances with other kings. So then Dhritarashtra had to feign, Duryodhana had to feign joy. Oh, my cousin survives. So because Dhritarashtra's sons had been ruling, they didn't want to give up the kingdom. So they made a deal. We'll give you half. Well, let's be fair here. We'll give you half of the kingdom. It was entirely theirs by inheritance, but the Duryodhana said, we'll give you half, see how magnanimous we were. So they gave them the half that was like desert, the worst part of the kingdom. They said, now this is your land to rule. Khandava Prasth, which is like the desert section. No people, no nothing, just deserted land. So at that point, Pandavas were very sarcastically grateful. Oh, just see what our generous cousins have given us. Anyway, let's make the most of it. And because they were devotees and Krishna was helping them through so many amazing ways, they built the most beautiful city, far more beautiful than the capital of the kingdom in Hastinapur. It was called Indraprastha. Indraprastha means it was the abode of Indra, equivalent to the heavenly kingdom. So there the Pandavas were ruling. Duryodhana was very jealous, but he couldn't do anything about it. And so the Pandavas were so well established that they decided to hold this Rajasuya sacrifice. So Rajasuya means a sacrifice of kings, or Raja. And whoever conducts this and successfully completes it is considered the ruler of the world. So Yudhishthira was encouraged to do this by Krishna and others, and finally he relented. He was not ambitious in that way, but he relented because it considered it a sacred duty. So this is the beginning of the description of the Rajasuya sacrifice in the 10th canto. So there's 3 sections. The first one has some dramatic reading. I would like to ask for a few volunteers to play a few different roles. Okay, we need someone to, these are fairly short speeches. Yudhishthira, we have a volunteer for Yudhishthira. Okay, Anna, Sahadev, highest brother of Yudhishthira. Sean, right? Okay. Shishupal. Okay, Nita. Okay, but mainly those 3. We'll just do that. And then the last 2 sections we'll just read around as we usually do. All right. The Lord took worship from Jarasandha's respectful son and rode off with his friends, their work for Yudhishthira all done. When they reached Indraprastha, they blew conch shells to announce their friends had been established and their enemies denounced. The residents adored that sound, as did King Yudhishthira, who listened as his brothers, and the Lord assuaged his fear. When he learned that the kings were free and all that had occurred, King Yudhishthira shed tears of love and couldn't say a word. What had happened? What happened on Friday? Anyone remember? Yes, Bhima killed Jarasandha and freed all of these captured kings. At last, the king addressed the Lord with obvious delight. Yudhishthira. Yeah, you readers, be ready with your minds, okay? The parts will come suddenly. At last, the king addressed the Lord with obvious delight.
Your precious orders grace the heads of all who are upright, including gurus of this world and heaven's every god. Yet you accept my orders as a part of your facade. Just as the sun is constant, though it seems to rise and fall, your role play doesn't alter your supremacy at all. Your attitude of service also graces devotees who, unlike brutes and animals, assist humanity.
His gratitude expressed, the king prepared the sacrifice by waiting for the proper time and seeking the advice of famous Vedic priests and sages. Soon he felt informed on how the Rajasuya sacrifice should be performed. These sages were invited, as were Dhritarashtra's clan, Duryodhana, Vidura, and the kings of many lands. The Vaishyas and the Shudras joined the Kshatriyas and priests, each bringing to the sacrifice a certain expertise. According to the principles of Vedic texts espoused, the Brahmins tilled the sacrificial ground with golden plows. Utensils for the sacrifice were also made of gold. Among the guests, the gods, well-dressed, flew in to join the fold. Lords Indra, Shiva, and Brahma were thoroughly aware, as were celestial beings who arrived from everywhere, that devotees of Krishna, like King Yudhisthira, are blessed with opulence akin to what the gods themselves possess. The gods who had performed the Rajasuya sacrifice observed King Yudhisthira's performance, perfect and precise. The priests were like the gods themselves, and Yudhisthira began to worship them according to the sacrificial plan. After that, all present were to choose among the guests the person most deserving to be honored as the best. So many great exalted sages, gods, and saints were there. The choice was hard. At last, Sahadev stood up and declared,
Lord Krishna is the person this assembly should select. He is the sacrifice itself in each and all respects. The gods, the sacred place, and all of these opulent supplies come only from Lord Krishna. Does this come as a surprise? Relying solely on himself, Lord Krishna manifests the whole cosmic creation. Then he puts it all to rest. All kinds of yoga, sacrifice, and other Vedic rites aim only for his pleasure. Therefore, choosing him is right. He generates the duties of this world. So by his grace, religion, business, pleasure, and release are taking place. By honoring Lord Krishna first, we're honoring ourselves. For he, the soul of all, is nothing separate from himself.
the saintly persons present cried out, King Yudhisthira took notice and wholeheartedly agreed. He lovingly bathed Krishna's feet as ritual decrees and sprinkled all with foot wash, making all but one feel pleased. That water purifies the world. The king, in ecstasy, gave Krishna gifts of gems and silk. He couldn't even see, for tears of love for Krishna filled the monarch's royal eyes. The congregation bowed as flowers showered from the sky. Amid this scene of bliss stood Shishupal, enraged and red. He thrashed his arms to gain attention, turned and boldly said,
Seems the devastating force of time is on display when elders let a simple child influence them this way. O leaders of the sacrifice, you surely know who's best for being honored. Why accept what Sahadev suggests? Will you neglect the great exalted sages that I see in favor of a cowherd who disgraced his family? Why should this quirky, cunning, and suited for no caste be given any other adulation, be it first or last? Seems as if a crow has wandered in the sacrifice to eat the holy sacrificial cakes of ghee and rice. The others left the holy lands to live within the sea, degrading and manipulating others constantly. The relatives of Krishna have been ostracized and cursed. How can this great assembly choose to worship Krishna first?
Just as a mighty lion might ignore a jackal's cries, Lord Krishna waited silently as Shishupal spoke lies. The insults, though, offended the most learned and devout, who covered up their ears, stood up, and angrily walked out. By listening complacently when Krishna is defamed, a person loses all religious merit he has gained. So some departed when they heard what Shishupal had said, while others, like the Pandavas, prepared to smash his head. Undaunted, Shishupal pulled out his vaunted shield and sword, deriding the devoted souls who sided with the Lord. As Shishupal was trying to despoil the sacrifice, Lord Krishna's razor disc removed his head, one clean slice. With this great feat, the crowd released a huge, unprompted roar, while Shishupal's supporters deftly tiptoed out the door. A self-effulgent light arose out of Shishupal just then, and entered Krishna, much as earthbound meteors descend. For 3 successive lifetimes, Shishupal despised the Lord. Because of his obsession, he at last gained this reward. He once had guarded Vishnu's gates, but later took a curse and had to bear 3 evil births before it was reversed. King Yudhisthira completed the momentous sacrifice by giving gifts and bathing in accord with Vedic rites. The king knew well that Krishna was the cause of his success, and Krishna stayed there with the king, obeying his request. The king appeared like Indra as his inner luster blazed. The honored gods and sages left him, singing Krishna's praise. At last the hour came for Krishna also to take leave, and Yudhishthira permitted it, though most reluctantly. Except for Duryodhana, the sinner, everyone was pleased. He couldn't bear the happiness of Krishna's devotees. If you, however, speak about the death of Shishupal, effects of sin that cause chagrin will end for once and all. So what are the three births referred to here in the text? Who are the gatekeepers of Jai and Vijay? So who was their first birth? They accepted a curse to take 3 births as demons rather than 7 births as devotees because they wanted to get it over with. So the first birth was Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, and then the second birth, Ravana and Kumbhakarna, right? And then technically they were earlier, but can't figure that one out. Come on, they lived thousands of years before. Anyway, and then finally their last birth, Shishupal and Santabhakra, whose death we'll read about later. Okay, so these incarnations of Jai and Vijay were just meant to give the Lord some competition as demons. Krishna fights with the demons, as Prabhupada said, just to keep the body fit. A little exercise. So the story about Shishupal also is explained in Mahabharata. He was born with 4 eyes and 3 arms. And this deformed baby was a great cause of distress to his parents. So they asked the sage what to do. And the sage assured them, don't worry. When you put this child in the lap of the one who will kill him, then his extra arm and eyes will disappear. So the mother was always putting him in every saintly person's lap because she was hoping that when she found out who it was, she'd be able to convince him not to kill her son. So in this case, one day Krishna was visiting this palace of his father, Dhamaghosh, Shishupal's father, and the mother dutifully put the child in Krishna's lap. Oh, extra eyes and arm were gone. So the mother said, she told them the whole story and said, please don't kill my son. Please tolerate his offenses. And so Krishna said, don't worry, I will tolerate 100 offenses from your son. So in this gathering, we just have a short version here, but he criticized Krishna 100 times. And Krishna had his clicker, I guess. 8, 99, 100, 101. So this was the demise of Shishupal. Now, all of these insults to Krishna are actually indirect praises, as explained by the acharyas. Just as an example, he is accused of insulting, disgracing his family. What does that refer to? Anyone know? You think of any family member that Krishna had some issue with? Kamsa, because Krishna killed his uncle, Kamsa. In this way, he disgraced his family. And he would not take the throne after that, another disgrace. And so many. So apparent insults were actually glorifications, but Krishna counted them as insults nonetheless. So any questions about this section? Comments, reflections?
I remember one from the last time we read this section, like he was called as not suited for no caste. And that just means that, yeah, Krishna is like above all social jurisdictions or castes. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. He was born in a Kshatriya family, but then he lived as a Vaishya, but then he became the ruler of Dwarka again. So he could not seem to keep a steady caste.
Appreciate one of the lines, the wordplay in there was religion, business, pleasure, and release. You caught that. It was very smooth.
Karma, artha, kama.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Yes.
I think I heard that Jagai and Madai were incarnations of Jai and Vijay. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, but they weren't quite curse because they were involved in a nice pastime and became devotees.
I think they may have extended their stay to have Lord Chaitanya's association. Okay. Anyone else shed light on it? That was my understanding. Yes. Okay.
I was just thinking it was funny how they're saying Krishna is the best and Shishupal saying no, he's not the best. And then when he dies, Shishupal's soul goes into Krishna in front of everybody, just proving the point that Krishna's the best.
That's Krishna. Who was another demon that Krishna killed? Who got the same kind of Agasura? Yeah. So in this way, Krishna showed that he was so tolerant and accepting that even if somebody offended him, he would give them liberation. And so it's elsewhere it's spoken that if Krishna liberates even the demons who are trying to kill him, what to speak of somebody who's trying, however imperfectly, to serve him. Just imagine how that person will be benedicted by Krishna.
Kalakantha. What Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were Sachi Yuga, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so before Lord God. Yeah, oh yeah, okay. All right, anything else?
Since it was in sacrifice, Krishna made sure that when the head was chopped off, no blood spilled. So nothing was polluted. It's like the lights thing.
This word cauterized, cut. Got it. All right, so now let's read the next section, which is about the conclusion of the sacrifice, which has to come in the form of a bathing ceremony that everybody takes part in. The king does it, and everyone else at the sacrifice does it. So why don't we read, let's say 2 stanzas each, men's side, women's side. He'd listened now for days, but Vishnurata wasn't tired. When Shukadev's last statement puzzled him, the king inquired, if people love this sacrifice so sage as I just heard, then why was Duryodhana upset? Did something else concur?
The patient Sukadev replied, his subjects all admired your grandfather, King Yudhisthira, and did what he desired. As Bhima ran the kitchen, Sahadev was there to greet the venerated guests, and then Krishna washed their feet. The treasurer was Duryodhana. Nakula bought supplies. The elders went to Arjuna, and Karna supervised delivery of gifts. Queen Draupadi served out the meals, and everyone contributed. The mood was quite ideal.
Sacrifice was finished with assistance from the staff, except for Yudhisthira's conclusive sacrificial bath. As drums were pounded, horns were sounded, flutes and cymbals played, delighting gods above as lovely dancers turned and swayed. The kings, adorned in gold, felt bold, their armies right behind, proceeding to the Ganga, where the waters are divine. With infantry and cavalry and elephants as well, the many massive armies seemed to shake the earth as well. So.
The rituals of officials, joined by learned priests, recited Vedic mantras with delightful expertise. Residents of heaven, gods and sages looking on, rained flowers on the gathering below and sang along. The well-dressed men and women wearing garlands, silks, and gems began to sprinkle liquids on each other as a whim. The men soaked lovely courtesans with yogurt, oil, and scents. The courtesans with glee drenched several men in self-defense.
Attracted by the fun, the queens of Yudhisthira came out and found themselves as targets in the friendly liquid bout. As Krishna, Bhima, Arjuna, and others splashed the queens, their shyly smiling faces bloomed, embellishing the scene. The queens had large syringes to squirt fluids at the men, so yellow-tinted liquids flew again and yet again. As dripping clingy saris showed the forms of thighs and busts, the lesser men observing felt their minds inflamed with lust.
Yudhisthira, resplendent in the presence of his queens, was like the sacrifice itself among small routines. Queen Draupadi joined Yudhisthira to hold the final rites. They bathed in Ganga's waters to the demigod's delight. The citizens bathed also, for the Ganga's waters cleanse effects of endless lifetimes full of countless dreadful sins. The king put on new garments and then honored all his guests by giving them fine jewelry and new expensive dress.
The men wore turbans, waistcoats, gems, and all things debonair. The women sported earrings, golden belts, and perfect hair. The sages, gods, and other guests, both famous and unknown, were honored by King Yudhisthira and went back to their homes. As ordinary men cannot stop drinking something sweet, the guests could not stop praising Yudhisthira's amazing feat. The king himself felt separation's fierce impending pain, so he convinced Lord Krishna and some others to remain.
Lord Krishna sent some leaders back to Dwarka and stayed. King Yudhishthira thus finished his remarkable crusade. To hold the Rajasuya sacrifice a daunting task and show the world that Krishna helps when his devotees ask. King Yudhishthira's success and riches rankled Duryodhana. His palace, for example, was resplendent far beyond. The palace Duryodhana enjoyed, and Draupadi as well, unsettled Duryodhana, who'd failed to win her for himself.
Lord Krishna's many queens stayed on at Draupadi's request. Their charming gait and slender waists and kumkum-dusted breasts enhanced their lovely faces, which were framed in flowing hair. They beautified the palace as they wandered here and there. One day, as Yudhishthira held court with Krishna at his side, he seemed as rich as Indra, but without a trace of pride. Then Duryodhana, with royal crown, burst in his cousin's court, admonishing the doorkeepers with insolent retorts.
Palace daughter Maya Danava had placed protective built-in features that intruders couldn't trace. Bewildered by these mystic hoaxes, Duryodhana mistook a pool to be a solid floor, for that is how it looked. When Duryodhana fell in the water, Bhima laughed aloud, along with all the women, kings, and others in the crowd. King Yudhishthira attempted to restrain this mockery, and Krishna smiled along and gave a nod approvingly.
Victorious and angry, Duryodhana got out, and looking down, stones out from the crust that is out from the sound. King Yudhishthira and other saints rejected all the mirth, but Krishna simply saw a burden rising from their feet.
So this answers Shukadeva's question. Why was Duryodhana embarrassed? They did the whole sacrifice successfully, and then this last little episode is mentioned, which leads on, of course, to further stimulate Krishna's purpose, or fulfill Krishna's purpose in descending to the earth. And what was that purpose in the first place?
To alleviate the burden, unnecessary burden.
Alleviate, yes, to get rid of all of the armies that were overburdening the earth. So by fostering this sort of competition between the cousins, Krishna had his purpose. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is exhorting Arjuna to fight, because his purpose is to annihilate all the armies, and Arjuna is the best warrior. So when Arjuna wants to renounce his fighting position, Krishna is not having any of it. And this was very difficult when Srila Prabhupada was introducing this in the hippie generation in the 60s and 70s, because at that time there was this very unpopular war going, Vietnam War, and young men were subject to being drafted to it. So this was not well received. Why was Krishna exhorting Arjuna to fight? Why shouldn't he just have peace, man? Give peace a chance. So, but Prabhupada never compromised. But the reason is that the fighting fulfilled Krishna's purpose. So here and in many other places, Krishna is doing things to facilitate this internal battle between the Pandavas and the Kurus, so that all of these armies could be annihilated. So this is all a precursor to the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata. Vedic descriptions are not chronological, and that's hard for us Westerners to comprehend. An episode will be pulled from here, from there, but not in logical or time sequence, chronological sequence. So here we're hearing about this sacrifice, the Rajasuya sacrifice, the king of all sacrifices, which Yudhishthira pulled off successfully. That irritated Duryodhana, and then he got embarrassed in the palace, and that irritated him even more. So that prompted him to think how he could destroy Yudhisthira, which is subsequently what happens, at least materially. So the topic of sacrifice is something I wanted to conclude with this morning. Sacrifice is almost a dirty word, isn't it? In our contemporary society, you have to make a sacrifice. People will respect it, but nobody wants to really do it. But there's so much sacrifice involved just to live in this world. For example, just to maintain the body requires so much sacrifice, so much investment of time and energy. You know, to go to the doctor, or to go to the dentist, or to tolerate the pain of not going to the doctor or not going to the dentist. You just can't win. You can't win, you can't break even, and you can't quit. But you still have to just do this on and on. So in the material concept of life, what is the object of our sacrifice? Well, in the larger sense, it is. The object of our daily sacrifice is what? Ourselves, and I mean, more specifically, what part of ourselves? The body. The body is the recipient of all of our sacrificial offerings. You know, for example, we will wake the body in the morning for bathing and dressing. You know, we'll place the body in front of the mirror, and then we'll put on the outfits for the day. And you know, we'll say the Govindam prayers, like welcoming the body to the day. Then we'll prepare an offering, a nice offering of delicious foods for the body. This way, the sacrifice, nobody avoids sacrifice. Yes, yes. Yes, everybody is very much in awe of other powerful bodies. But everybody kind of, you know, my body's not so bad. And we have to feel that way because it is the object of our devotion. So with this sacrifice being inevitable, the Bhagavad Gita explains why not direct it in a way that is actually beneficial. If we direct our sacrifice only to the material body, where does it end up? It's just, yeah, graveyards. If you're a Jain, it ends up as the stool of vultures. Have you ever heard of this? The Jain religion is non-violent religion, so they have what in Mumbai what's called the Tower of Silence. Oh, Zoroastrians, I beg your pardon. Yeah, so Zoroastrians. Yeah, so when a faithful Zoroastrian dies, they will take the body to the top of this tower and leave it for the vultures. So the vultures can benefit from this non-violent Zoroastrian. Or if it is buried, it is becomes the worm food, right? The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle with your snout. I was like, remember this from your, anyway, I guess you're too young to remember these famous poetries. Yeah, this is our first or second grade meditation on death. So vultures, worms will eat, or if it's cremated, then it just becomes ashes. What is the end of this sacrifice? This is the point. All of this sacrifice and nothing to show for it. So in chapter 3 of the Gita, Krishna talks about how to direct sacrifice in a way that actually brings something beneficial. Let's all chant this verse together. Yagnar tat karmano yatra lokoyam dharma bandhana kayatam karma pranteya sangyam samachara. Translation together. Work done as a sacrifice to tradition has to be performed, otherwise we're bondage in this material world. Therefore, if the son of Kunti perform its prescribed duties with its satisfaction, and in that way he will always be free from bondage. Free from bondage means no anxieties. There was a famous wealthy man in the 30s, I believe, named Howard Hughes. You know, heard of Howard Hughes? So he was so wealthy that he wanted to preserve his body at any costs. And he was very paranoid. So he didn't want anyone to be able to evaluate his health. So he would carefully store all of it. He's extremely wealthy. He had this big palace and he lived by himself. Nobody could come near him. And he would store all of his urine in jars because he was afraid that if he flushed it down the toilet, someone would analyze the urine and discover his health condition. So my point is that sacrifice must be done regardless. So why not do it for Vishnu? Do it for Krishna. Otherwise, it will just cause bondage in this world. Perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. There's no way to buy your way out of bondage. That's the point. There's no way to become free from that because we're attached to this world. There was a famous story of a disciple who came to his guru and said, Gurudev, how do I get free from attachments? And the guru said, okay, meet me in the forest, such and such a place tomorrow at noon, and I will tell you. So the disciple dutifully came. There was the guru in the forest. He was embracing a tree. And he said to his disciple, oh, finally you've come. Please help me. This tree's got me. Help me, help me, help me get free of this tree. So the disciple, very bewildered, and said, Gurudev, just let go of it and you'll be free. And the guru said, yes, so this is what I'm trying to tell you about material life. Just let go of it and you'll be free. So the letting go is essential, but nobody can just live like Howard Hughes tried to let go. Nobody can live that way. You have to do something, right? No one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment, Krishna says. It's exacerbated by the screen generation that we are all part of because that enhances the ADHD tendencies. You know, this television producers know that there has to be something new flashed on the screen every 3 seconds in order to keep the viewer's interest. So boom, 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 boom. In this way, there is this bondage because we're attached to things that don't benefit us. That's the point. We are attached to something that is not true and that has no beneficial purpose whatsoever. Isn't that stupid? And yet, because we don't have anything else, we hold on to it. And if we try to let go of it, we can't remain in that position. Later in the 10th canto, the personified Vedas, I believe, say, Aruya Krichkena Param Padam Tata Patanche Yujmadandraya. And just letting go may allow a person to gain some semblance of spiritual realization, but inevitably they'll come back to material activities, even if it's somewhat dressed up, like charitable activities or philanthropic activities. Srila Prabhupada very colorfully compared this impersonal attempt at freedom to the cockroach in the commode. The cockroach is somehow in the commode and tries to scramble up the porcelain sides, but keeps falling back down. So in the same way, the impersonalists will rise up, trying to become released from material attachments, but they keep going back down again. So sacrifice for Vishnu, it has this quality of fulfillment that is lacking when there's no deity to be worshipped. When we're not sacrificing for someone, we don't have a relationship, then sacrifice means nothing. Like the economic impetus for a man, it's described by some famous economists, is only present if there's a family. If there's no family, then the economic impetus is greatly reduced. But if there's people whom one loves, who's depending on them, then there's an incentive to try to provide for them. See, so in the same way, if there's no relationship for sacrifice, if there's no purpose for no one to please, why should we do it? Why should we bother? So in this verse, Krishna is explaining why Arjuna should fight, but not fight for the sake of the kingdom. Fight for Krishna's, because it's Krishna's desire. So how do we know what is Krishna's desire? How do we know how to complete the sacrifice of our lives? This is where the role of the guru is so prominent and so important. Once there was one of Prabhupada's disciples who was on the ambitious side. And so he went from India to Africa, where there are many Indian families, immigrant Indian families who've been very prosperous. And he raised a lot of money from them. And then he went back to Srila Prabhupada in India and put this big stack of money on his desk. And he said, Prabhupada, I want to take sannyas. So Prabhupada was taken aback. See, in those days, sannyas was a very prestigious, big thing. And, you're a big shot in the society of devotees, you take sannyas. Prabhupada, I want to take sannyas. And Prabhupada responded, why do you want to take sannyas? After all, sannyas means an austere life of renunciation. And the disciple thought, and he said, because it is my desire. Not the best answer. So Prabhupada immediately asked, we should ask, what is Krishna's desire? And he responded, we should ask, what is Krishna's desire? So just sacrifice doing something that we want to do is not necessarily going to guarantee that Krishna is pleased, you see. So what is Krishna's desire for us? We have to get guidance from mentors. We have to get guidance from the Shastra. We have to get guidance from the previous examples of saintly persons. Then we can understand, what does Krishna want? We all have a natural propensity, and to use that for Krishna is the perfection of that propensity. But if we have our own ideas, okay, I think I'd like to do this for Krishna or that for Krishna. Well, how do we know that Krishna accepts that sacrifice? See, there's a story of a devotee named Gopal Bone. Gopal Bone was a rather materialistic devotee. And he was devotee, but he also had he wanted to serve in particular ways. So one day he was sewing a beautiful garland of banana flowers. Before the banana gives its fruit, it produces this large, purple, beautiful flower. So he was sewing a garland of these flowers. And these flowers are so nice, they can also be cooked as subject. So he was sewing the garland, and then his friend came and said, Gopal, what are you doing? I'm sewing a garland for Krishna, and Krishna is going to personally come and take this garland from me. And the skeptical friend said, and what will happen if Krishna doesn't come and personally take this garland? If Krishna doesn't personally come and take this garland from me, then I'm going to cook it up and eat it. So we have our ideas how to sacrifice for Krishna, but is it really what Krishna wants? Are we doing it because we want to please Krishna, or because we have our own ambitions and our own desires? So this is how sacrifice is perfected over a lifetime. Gradually, just what is it that Krishna wants me to do? We come to understand, and then doing that brings us great satisfaction. Otherwise, whatever we may do will keep us bound up and attached to that self-destructive material concept of life. All right, we'll stop there. Anna, you have a comment? Question? Okay.
Thank you for class. Let's see how well I can articulate this. So you said two things, and I'm wondering how we tell the difference between these things, or like where that boundary lies. That we each have, natural propensities, and then we are to use those propensities in Krishna's service. But where's the line between that and because to me that sort of translates into the things that we are inclined to do, the things that we want to do are, some of them can be like messages, like, oh, this is the type of work that I'm supposed to do. So where is that line where it's like, oh, I'm doing this for Krishna because I've invented it?
The foundational practice of bhakti needs to be completed before we can really come to the stage of saying, okay, now I want to apply my particular talents. So that's one clue. No rush, in other words, that I have to be engaged according to this particular propensity. the foundational, the basic things of bhakti, the Shravanam, Kirtanam, like these things are a learning curve in and of themselves. So practically speaking, at Krishna House, what happens is people come who are new to bhakti, or maybe have some experience with bhakti. Every situation is different, but the foundational experience, learning the Gita, learning the etiquette, learning the basic practices, getting up to speed and chanting 16 rounds. You know, if we're followers of Prabhupada, we try to do these things. And that takes time. It takes time to develop in a way that we're comfortable with all of this, following the regular principles, chanting 16 rounds. Before that point, if we're get hung up on doing some particular thing for Krishna, it's probably not what Krishna wants us to do. But at that point, if we have achieved a steadiness in our spiritual practices, taken initiation, making a vow to remain steady, then at that point, it's incumbent on us to find out what it is that we really want to do for Krishna. And that, as I said, it takes time. It takes a lot of, it's very good to try different things also for that reason, you know, to have a variety of experiences, cooking, distributing books, managing. If you're in school or you have an established career, well, then the challenge is, let me learn how to offer this to Krishna, which is really hard, right? It's very hard because school is so different than the temple. Often hear this, and people are saying, oh, do I really have to finish this degree? And just do it for Krishna. You do your best and offer it to Krishna. Right? This is your offering right now, and then it'll be over. It'll be over. One of the great benefits of growing old is patience. So, like when I was young, a year seemed like an eternity, and now I'm old. A year seems like, yeah, okay, I can do that for a year. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay. So we shouldn't prematurely glom onto something. This is what I have to do for Krishna. Nor should we prematurely glom onto somebody and say, okay, well, this is my guru. Whatever this guru tells me to do, that's what I want to do for Krishna. Both those things are common mistakes for premature. Better to get first qualified. Just to elaborate a little bit more, like saying getting married. Oh, I fall in love with somebody and get married. Well, you don't have a job, you don't have a house, you don't have a car, but we love each other. That's all that matters. And those marriages can often have trouble. So better you have your foundation set, spiritually and materially, and then consider that big step.
They say love is blind.
Love is blind. Yes. They say a lot of things about love. All right, anything else? Govinda. Yes,
So thank you for class. Something I've been meditating in connection to your class is this. You said the perfection of all sacrifice is always pleasing Krishna in a sense. But what if I was thinking that's also a very high standard of mindset, always, doing everything as a sacrifice for Krishna. So how do we come to that platform naturally? Yeah.
How do we come to the platform of naturally doing everything for Krishna? Yeah, this begins with sadhana bhakti. Little sacrifices like getting up early and putting on tilak or putting on devotional clothing or singing the prayers. All these things are sacrifices, and they are meant to help awaken our original dormant taste for sacrificing for Krishna. Little things, but if we keep ourselves engaged in doing little things for Krishna, let me do this nicely for Krishna. This is something to eat, let me offer it to Krishna. These things, abhyasa yoga yuktena, they awaken the desire to serve Krishna all the time. Ultimately, it's pleasure because we're driven by pleasure, and we just experience that sacrifice for Krishna makes us happy. Can you put up that other verse, 431? This is one of the best verses to memorize from Bhagavad Gita because it's the shortest verse in the entire text. Only one line. I am Lokostiya Bhagyasya Kutonya Kuru Satama. This means, oh, best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily in this planet or in this life, what then of the next? So the sacrifice for Krishna has this amazing quality of being fun, a lot more fun than we expect. We all experience that. Anyone ever heard there's this hilarious horse race narration by, what is it, the devotee's name? Yadunath Prabhu. Yes, he is a professional actor and also a comedian. And he did this horse race call for entertaining the devotees in Vrindavan one year. Yeah, I think you can find it online. So he's calling the names of all the horses. They're in a big race. And here come first sadhana's taking the lead, but then here comes sex desire overtaking sadhana, and it's sex desire by a length. But wait, on the outside, here comes Prabhupada's mercy. But one of the horses was named, oh yeah, here's sadhana, and then here comes, oh, this is fun. So the sacrifice for Krishna is fun. That's really, that's like the special introductory offer that Krishna gives. It's fun. We discover it's fun. And then we discover that it's a lot of work also. So the foundation, again, is so important because the fun sustains us. The memory of that relief from material suffering sustains us through the inevitable challenges Krishna gives us to purify us. But the end stage is like Bhaktivinoda describes, everybody in the village just thinks he's nuts. Anyway, he's rolling on the Ganga. He doesn't care.
I was thinking that most of the things we do as devotees, it might be mixed with mixed intentions. Even if it's not just explicitly, oh, this is for my sense gratification. It's more like, say, career, for instance. Well, I want to have a job so that I'm not poor. There's some fear involved, and there's different emotions involved. So when these emotions are involved that are still pertaining somewhat to the body, how do we then engage in Krishna service? How do we offer the Krishna?
Right, by being patient and recognizing that we've been attached to the things of this world for a long time. So they're not going to go away instantly. If we're in bounds, we're working, pursuing a career and doing something constructive, and then offering the fruits of that to Krishna, whether in the form of giving some Lakshmi or raising a family for Krishna. Whatever we do, try to do it for Krishna. Some said here, Hari Toshina. And again, it's hard to be patient enough because it seems like an eternity, a year, 5 years, 10 years. But it goes by so fast if you're doing your best to please Krishna. If I can speak from the other side of the hill, and my friend Vaninath Prabhu will join me, right? Comment, please. What?
In that regard, Mother Irmela, when she was here, gave a very some interesting instructions. She said, kind of like on the other side of this. She said, but don't wait for that to do something for Krishna. And she was saying like this, just take it for granted that, yes, there are some other things mixed in there, but just go ahead enthusiastically get something, do something, be engaged, yes, and carry on whatever, and those things will be addressed.
That's so important. Thank you. Yes. As opposed to, oh, my service for Krishna is to address all of my shortcomings. Then we're like, a dog chasing its tail. We're not getting anywhere. Krishna knows our shortcomings, but he also sees that if we're just trying to do a little bit for him, worship the deity or write something or cook something, or we're just trying within our conditioned state to do something. That's a beautiful and very important point. And then the problems become relieved. Every time we sit down to hear or read, it's a sacrifice. We're sacrificing our time. We're sacrificing our brain power. And Krishna sees that. much more than he sees all the other stuff that we are hanging on to. Thank you. All right, last point from Gopi.
On this topic of how do we know if what we're doing is actually pleasing to Krishna? I would argue that it's not so much what it is that we're doing, but it's the level to which we're just trying to do it independently. So, okay, I might like writing. Am I going to start some writing blog, or am I going to check with the temple I'm staying at if there's any way we can use writing as a service? I like doing Harinam, so I'm going to decide every day I'm going to go out for half an hour. I can't wait for these temple authorities to give me some free time so I can just go on my Harinam. Or am I going to try and organize Harinams with everyone whenever everyone has time? So just like that, it's just about slotting in, becoming part of the team. And, yeah, not being too.
That's a very good point. The cooperative attitude, Krishna appreciates that very much, that we are not thinking ourselves better than others or aloof from others. These are symptoms of devotional service in the modes of nature. In the third canto, there's a very interesting discussion about how bhakti can be performed in passion or ignorance or goodness. And one of the symptoms of ignorance and passion is still bhakti, but it's like the devotee thinks, oh, I got to be separate from these others. Either I'm better than them, or I don't want to be bothered by them. As opposed to the mode of goodness, which is I want to have the association of uplifting people. I was just reading this morning about a disciple who asked Srila Prabhupada how reading, he wanted to just read. You know, Prabhupada, you said to study your books, and this is my propensity, so I just want to study your books, but the temple authorities are always asking me to do stuff. What should I do? And Prabhupada very patiently explained to him that you hear in the morning, you hear in the evening, any spare time that you have, and then otherwise you work cooperatively with your God brothers and God sisters. Again, let's get back to the foundation. You know, we do very simple tasks in our foundational stages of bhakti. You know, cooking something or serving Krishna lunch or doing Harinam, simple things that are not difficult. And then we can just focus on developing our spiritual mind. All right, thank you so much. Mahaprasad ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.